Welcome to this virtual room and welcome everyone who is streaming this chat through the ESPON media. I'm Wiktor Sztarowski, Director of the EGTC ESPON, the operational body for daily management, daily operation of this EU-funded program. We are investing into the territorial evidence. That is the way that we would like to connect researchers with policymakers all over Europe. We are an EU-funded program for all EU countries and also the partner states of Norway, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Iceland. And our ambition is to make the policies at all different levels of governance even better, to be well informed with the territorial evidence, the changes that need to be actually also responded by the adequate, needs-sensitive and place-based policies. We are investing our resources into a number of thematic activities, and these stem from the ones on circular economy, on sustainable land use, inner peripheries, green infrastructure, SDGs, sustainable transport, sustainable tourism, and so on. And today, we are going to talk about some of those. This is about the structural change in coal phase-out regions, just transition to a decarbonized economy, and sustainable development. Just to let everyone know that ESPON has recently released a policy brief on structural change potential of coal phase-out regions by commission of the German presidency of the Council of Europe. And we are very happy that we have two distinguished guests with us, two distinguished economists and key stakeholders that we would like to give floor for your exchange, your reflections on the issues I've just introduced. Dr. Markus Kerber, you are economists, you work a lot with the German industries, and also since 2018, you are the State Secretary at the Federal Ministry of the Interior, Building and Community in Germany, Berlin. And Professor Sachs, you have a long past of researching into economics, sustainable development. You are a best-selling author, you are a syndicated columnist, and you are very well known globally. So this is an honor that both of you actually decided to join our small virtual room and give your reflections on the work that we are delivering to you. So, Markus Kerber, I understand that you would also like to welcome the participants, the audience, on behalf of the German presidency in the EU Council. So, please, you have the floor.
Okay. Dear Director Szydorowski, esteemed Professor Sachs, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed that I would like to welcome you on behalf of the German presidency of the Council of the European Union to this session here. Why is the work of the European Spatial Planning Observation Network and the purpose today on emphasizing a change in connection with the coal phase-out so important for our presidency and our ministry? Just simply because the Green Deal that has been put forward by the European Commission also formats our policy approach. And in particular, Germany is one of the main coal phase-out countries in the European Green Deal overall setup. A transition of regions and of our macroeconomic model are at the forefront of our thinking. And although about 25% of Germany's primary energy production is still based on coal or fossil fuel, we are phasing it out until 2038. And in making this phase out digestible to the affected regions, we have coughed up a program of 40 billion to cover the transition, 40 billion euros in Germany, to cover the transition on this regional coal phase out, to sort of mitigate the effects and to make sure that these regions have a promising future. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'm very warmly welcoming you. But let me make one final remark. I am not I am not an esteemed economist at the moment when Jeffrey Sachs is in the same room with me. So with these words, I would like to pass over back to you and then hopefully to Professor Sachs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Markus Kerber, for this introduction. On behalf of the presidency, I'm also honored to say that my home country, Poland, was also using the valuable support and advice from Professor Sachs many years ago in transforming the economy to a market one. So your suggestions for reforms were really, really useful and very appreciated by many of us. I would like now to switch to my eminent colleague, Vasilen, who is the author of the policy brief and the extract from this policy brief, the map you can see on the screen right now. And Vasilen will be guiding us through the session today and also moderating it. So Vasilen, please, you have the floor.
Good afternoon to Berlin. Good morning to New York. Many thanks for having us, for having you with us today. And we are going to delve straight into a set of questions that we have prepared, all emanating from the policy brief of ESPON on structural change in coal phase-out regions. We have been analyzing a number of issues being debated over the past few years in the coal regions. And we have realized that they boil down to three particular matters, what we would like to discuss with you today, and I'm very happy that we have also reflections from our member states on those. We are going to delve straight into the first issue, but before we do that, I'd like to invite you to interact with each other, to reflect on each other's comments. I think it's a very unique encounter today. Very thrilled to hear your reflections and also your comments on each other. So the first, let us delve into the first issue. It is quite intuitive to think that the first issue is related to energy, because when we talk about coal phase-out regions, the first thing that will come to stakeholders' mind is energy decarbonization and energy supply. And so we claim that when we talk about structural change in coal phase-out regions, the structural change itself is not a matter of decarbonized energy supply only. And I'm saying that because, and I'm happy that we are able to share also some evidence now on the screen. You will actually see the spatial distribution of the coal regions in Europe, and the mere diameter of the circles, which show the absolute figures of the jobs anticipated to be lost or estimated to be lost by 2030, will give you a sense of the gravity of the problem. But in the center of the circles, we have very often very small communities. And evidence suggests, both empirical research and also expert judgment, that very often these communities are not ready yet to embrace renewable energies. They don't have a tradition of innovation, they don't have the culture of sustainability. And so the question, and if you allow me, Dr. Kerber, maybe to start with you first, the question here is this the only pathway, or is the only way to terminate an economic pathway dependency with another path dependency, or maybe to formulate it differently, is it enough to simply change the color of, let's say, brown energy to green energy, or are there any other sustainable diversification pathways to be considered? Mr. Kerber, maybe to you first.
Thanks very much. I can only at the moment focus on, of course, the German situation. And if we look at, by the way, like in any other country of the European Union, played a key role in the development of our economy for the past 200 years since the beginning of the industrialization. We have to distinguish between the coal areas which are further to the west and the ones that are further to the east when I answer your question. Because indeed, to replace one dependency with another one would not be very smart. And in the western part of our coal regions, in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is bordering on Holland, on Belgium, and is part of a much wider multi-sector industrial approach, I think the phase-out will be happening in a totally different way from our easterly coal regions. But let me start by one observation. What is so, because it's a capital-intensive industry, you have a very small number of very large companies doing the coal and energy production. And we have to focus on these large capital providers in whatever way we want to mitigate the social and economic pathway out of the codependency. These companies are very intertwined in the region, and what they provide is social stability because they have workers' co-determination. They have a lot of social capital invested in these regions. So to have them as a partner is one thing. Having them as a partner would suggest, as you said, that we go from brown dependency to green dependency, but I cannot do the transition without talking to these top companies. And of course, part of the way forward will be a replacement of the brown industry, brown energy production by the green one. Having said that, the green industry is not only a very promising one, but it has a totally different structure. It's a totally different technology. So the innovation content in the green industry is very promising also for small to medium-sized companies. It's a much more digitalized form of energy production. It's much more decentralized. So different capabilities will come into these regions. And without losing too much time of what I should be using here, we see very promising first steps of these companies being the VC partners or the fertilizers for a different industry structure that is much more service-oriented, much more digital, and reaches out into other sectors of the economy. So I do not at the moment in Germany see a replacement by one dependence through another one. On the contrary, what I would urge us all to remember is it's still a 15 to 20-year process before you have replaced, I don't know, 20, 30, 40,000 jobs in coal extraction and coal burning into a green, decentralized industry approach. So patience and capital and a certain empathy for the socio-economic and geographical setup in the region is what it takes.
Professor Sachs, let us stay on that thought a little bit now, involving the industry and the key role of the industry. And I'm very happy to have a question from Poland in this context. I think the industry, this is also what Dr. Kerber was suggesting, is in a way an actor that is able to change the trajectory of path dependency. The question from Poland is here, it bridges a little bit economic theory with practice. Path dependency and path creation are analytical frameworks to investigate the conditions for economic growth. Now the question from Poland is how to change path dependency trajectory, in particular in Poland, and I appreciate also your history and connection to Poland, to a path creation trajectory.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I'm really delighted to be with you. Thanks to ESPON for its work. Thanks to Germany for its leadership on this issue also, which is extremely important and helping to show the way. And Europe's experience and leadership will help the United States now, which is finally getting a president that will be interested in also making an energy transition. And we're going to be learning a lot from the European Green Deal, also from all of the experience of Germany and the Coal Commission and the sequencing and timing of these efforts. I think it's important, as Dr. Kerber has just emphasized also, there are three issues that we're talking about, it seems to me. One is the energy transformation. The world has to decarbonize energy by mid-century at the latest to have some chance at climate safety. And I think it's very important to note that Europe is in the lead of this. The European Green Deal is a really superb policy document and political document. It also has inspired now China to make a commitment to decarbonize by 2060. This is a European accomplishment, and Europe should be very proud of that. I want to continue to urge China to accelerate that to 2050, but this is a big breakthrough that's been made. Second, Japan has now done the same, Korea has now done the same, and President Biden will make a commitment for the United States similarly to decarbonize by 2050. So finally, we're getting on a global track, and Europe is in the lead of that. The second issue is the issue of individuals and jobs and livelihoods and social protection. And I think it's very notable here that when you look at the map that you showed us, it looks like all of Europe is covered, which it is in some way impacted by this issue, but the numbers of direct jobs involved in coal mining or in coal power plants is very, very modest. We should know this so that we don't overwhelm ourselves in anguish or anxiety. The estimates are something on the order of 200 to 250,000 jobs on the line in a European Union labor force of around 180 million employed people. So this is far, far, far less than 1% of the workforce, somewhere between 0.1 to 0.2% of the workforce. Now take into account that the transformation is going to be gradual. It's going to take place over 20 years. Many people are going to be retiring normally. This is not anything of the scale, for example, of the transformation after 1989, not even remotely close in terms of the magnitudes of jobs involved and so forth. So this is very important to keep in mind because we need to be realistic both on the side of justice, but also not to panic ourselves that this is somehow beyond management financially, fiscally, in terms of retraining. It is not. And we have the same facts in the United States, actually. There are so few workers in the coal industry left in the United States, maybe 20,000 coal miners in a workforce of 150 million people. So the fears can be exploited politically. They can be felt, but they're not real. They are manageable. And this is not to denigrate any individual. People need to be helped in this, but it's to keep it in perspective. Then I think that there's a third issue, which is regional development, which is also core to ESPON's issue. Some of these regions were coal regions that not just the specific jobs, but this is where the development came for generations. It's already been clear that that reached a peak, and many of these are depressed regions, actually. So the question of how to have more general regional policy, what comes next, is a big question. Now, on each of these, let me just emphasize very quickly. On the energy security, fortunately, renewable energy technology is so good, the costs have fallen so much that we have every chance to have success in a low-cost transformation to net zero by mid-century. And many of the countries that are affected by coal have lots of wind power, for example, in the Baltic or the North Sea, or in the Black Sea region for Bulgaria and Romania, where there's tremendous wind potential as well. And incidentally, it is asynchronous with the wind in the North Sea. So when it's windy in one place, it's calm in the other. And that means if you connect a grid that is a European-wide grid, you get lots of balancing and lots of saving on the need for storage and other balance of system costs. So the main point I would emphasize for Europe on the energy transformation is there's plenty of potential, a lot of progress already, but I would make a European-wide energy policy, not 27 individual country energy policies, because a grid across Europe is more resilient, lower cost, and it's going to involve all of the countries. You've got hydro in some places in the Balkans. You have wind power in the Black Sea as well as the North Sea and the Baltic Sea. You have hydropower in Spain and Asturias. By connecting all of this into one European-wide energy system and energy market, there will be lots of efficiencies. When it comes to the jobs transformations and so forth, again, the scale is quite manageable, but it differs a lot by country. Poland is the most affected country, about 100,000 jobs, maybe half of the total jobs at stake are in Poland right now. Poland will need regional support for that. And then the questions are, what kinds of best alternatives in Silesia and elsewhere should be found? Doesn't have to be in the energy sector, but there will be something there. It doesn't have to be in mining, but there probably are some mining activities outside of coal that might still be viable because these are mining regions. But I would say more generally, we're moving to a digital world. That's good because people can do jobs for headquarters that are far away. We can integrate jobs and space more easily than ever before because of being in a digital world. I'd put a lot of emphasis on universities and tech hubs as ways to create the new small and medium startups that will play a very big role in all of the transformations. Similarly, and finally, on the regions, it just depends so much on which regions we're talking about, because as many of the excellent analyses have shown, there really are distinctive characteristics. Some are touristic zones, some are very nature-oriented, some are really in the hub of the core of the European economy to begin with. Some will be new industrial centers that will be producing the wind turbines, the PV, the electric batteries for the European automotive sector, and so on. And this requires some spatial analysis, which is why it's so important that ESPON is doing what it's doing. So just a few quick overview observations.
Professor Sachs, many thanks for this observation and assessment, and many thanks also for making the analogy to the historical structural change we've already gone through. And you mentioned anxiety and anguish, that we shall not be anxious of what is coming because we've been through difficult times. Let's keep this thought for a moment. We'll come back on that in a few minutes' time. Let me raise another question to Dr. Kerber. It's a question from the Czech Republic. I wouldn't say the Czech regions are anguished or anxious. I would say they're concerned. I'm referring to the coal regions, obviously, to Ústí, to Karlovy Vary, and Moravia Silesia. Stakeholders from the Czech Republic would like to hear your assessment. And Dr. Kerber, I think you are closer to instruments such as the Just Transition Fund and other instruments which are relating to the European Green Deal. The Czechs consider that some actions might be needed in addition to actions which correspond directly to carbon neutrality targets, that some actions which are indirectly contributing to structural change and indirectly linked to carbon neutrality might be needed. The talk is about social policies. What room for maneuver do you see for such policies which are not directly linked to certain targets, neutrality targets, for such regions? And what is the best mix of investments for regions like the Czech ones? Mr. Kerber.
I mean, building up on what Professor Sachs has just said in the end, or towards the end of his statement, I think all these mechanisms, also, and you mentioned the Just Transition Fund, must take into consideration when they're being executed what Professor Sachs has said, that basically each region is different. You may have a region that decides to invest in and get support and for that in, I don't know, CO2 capturing. So you're very close to what you've been doing in the coal industry. You're reusing a mine and you use your mechanical engineering skills. Other regions might go into the touristic area. And a third one might say we use as much, I don't know, the surfer farm power as possible in the region of former coal industry to empower the decentralized European grid that Professor Sachs has talked about. So three distinct approaches to redevelop three different regions. I think all of them should be supported by the Just Transition Fund, because all three regions are a part of a jigsaw that is called coal phase out and part of the Green Deal. And I hope that the administrators of these funds show the mix of imagination and bureaucratic flexibility, in itself a bit of an oxymoron, if I may say that, in order to make these schemes run, but keep on pressing, keep on pushing, and take countries like Germany as an example, where within our 40 billion fund, we have exactly that variety to administer that I've just named for three imaginary regions all across Europe. But each region is different, hence each region's redevelopment strategy to fulfill the requirements of the Green Deal are different, and the JTF has to take that into consideration.
Professor Sachs, in The End of Poverty, one of your popular books, you have identified 8 barriers or traps, let's call them traps, one of which is the lack of innovation. And this happens to coincide with one of the questions we have from Romania, and observations related to the Geo Valley, the Romanian coal region. Our colleagues from Romania claim that these are regions which are very poor in terms of innovation tradition. They don't have a sustainability culture. They don't have the incentives to invest in research and development. So in a way, they are trapped in what you will say is the innovation trap. And so the question is, I mean, it's clear that they are trapped. The question from the Romanian colleagues is how to get out of it, what to do in order to breach or to make this leap from a very, very poor culture of innovation to a culture of that embraces sustainability and innovation.
I think the answer and the good news is that Europe has a fantastic, in fact, world unique university network, knowledge network, and it includes many fine universities in Romania and many fine universities in the region. And Europe has the program of investing in research and development and basic science and innovation. And I believe more of that is needed. So we are living in a knowledge age. We are living in a time of technological breakthroughs in many, many key sectors. Most apparently the digital economy, which is transforming how every part of our society operates. And the more that Europe invests in its universities, and for a country like Romania, which has a general catching up challenge, because it's still trying to converge with European averages in general, investing in the strong university network and building university capacity and linkages with the rest of the knowledge network of Europe is a general point, not specific to the whole transformation, but general for any laggard region, especially the Central European regions that are, still trying to close the technology gap, the knowledge gap, the productivity gap with the Western Europe, I think is very, very important. And Horizon Europe and the other initiatives are extremely important. When we look at right now, everybody has eyes on China. What's China going to do? Why is it growing so fast? Is it going to take over everything? Well, one of the very clever things that China has done, of course, is a massive, massive investment in cutting edge technologies, pretty much across the board in China in their Made in China 2025 strategy. So that's what scared the wits out of so many people. Look at what they're investing in. They're investing in semiconductors and robotics, in clean energy, in electric vehicles, in intercity rail, in low emission aviation, in precision agriculture. And, it horrified my country, the United States, because we're lazy here. And so we got scared of watching China jump ahead. And everybody said, oh, they're cheating. They're doing all sorts of terrible things. But the fact of the matter is they were investing in PhDs by the hundreds of thousands building the new advanced economy. Europe, of course, is such a sophisticated place, a unique place in the world. It's the greenest, the highest living standards. It's the most sustainable place on the planet, but it needs to keep investing in knowledge. And I think that this is a fundamental point. Europe has the world's largest and longest lived university network on the globe, because the first universities basically were in Europe for the last 1,000 years. Many of them in Central and Eastern Europe, by the way, which go back to 1200 or 1300. Charles University in Prague is founded in 1349, I believe. So this is where I would put big investments, because what we see in the knowledge economy is that the universities become the hubs of small business, of startups, of new tech firms, of training people to live in our digital age. And they create the ecosystems around them, but they need the public investments and the partnerships to do this. And so this is what I would say in general for Romania, is to do more of this. It's not really the tradition of innovation so much as the investment in a knowledge economy, I would say, that's crucial right now.
Very pleased you mentioned the investments in knowledge and in innovation, because this actually brings us to the second big issue that the ESPON policy brief is debating, and I'd like to hear both of your views reflecting on this. Professor Sachs, I'm borrowing some of your concepts. I will say clinical economics in this case. We are sharing a slide with you. This is not a diagnosis of the regions. This is an attempt to have a diagnostic scale instead. And as you will see, there are two trajectories which we are using, two territorial parameters, the knowledge stock and the entrepreneurial stock. And these are regions that you've seen before on the map, the regions which are estimated to suffer the most severe losses by 2030 in terms of jobs. And so, as I said, this is not a diagnosis. This is not a very accurate Cartesian chart, but in a way, we attempted to put these regions relative to each other in terms of their knowledge stock and entrepreneurial stock. And this shows actually a very big variance in their potential to induce structural change based on these parameters. Now, for us, these are the two crucial parameters for two reasons. The first reason is that these are parameters that we believe are likely to be influenced by actions which are already programmed under the Just Transition Fund, actions related to research and development investments and investments in businesses. On the other hand, we believe that these are parameters which are best able or best likely to explain the big variance in structural change potential, in comparison to parameters which are influenced by other actions programmed under the Just Transition Fund, like land restoration and social support. And so this is why for us this is an interesting picture, an interesting diagnostic tool. Again, not a diagnosis as yet, but when you look into those two parameters, both Dr. Kerber and Professor Sachs, do you think that this will, in a way, it was meant to reduce death weight losses and to increase the effectiveness of, let's call it, the therapies that we are applying? But do you believe that with such a concept, we can actually come a little bit closer to a more accurate diagnostics in the region? And to make my question a little bit more concrete, we have a question from the European Investment Bank, from the colleagues from the Regional Development Division. How can the affected regions, meaning the regions that you see also now plotted in this two-dimensional chart, how can they induce the right investment mix? Dr. Kerber, maybe we can start with you, with your reflections.
Well, I shouldn't be saying that as a senior civil servant, but the ground rule still applies, and that is a dynamic based development can certainly not be planned by applying a certain top-down investment mix. But what we can do is we can do what the Chinese, to which Professor Sachs has just alluded, have done. they have studied economic history. And they applied the lessons of economic history in Europe to their own territory in China. They're always puzzled, the Chinese scientists and the Chinese civil servants, when we tell them, what the hell are you doing in China? They look at us and say, well, we're replicating you. We've learned your lessons. And the lessons are exactly what Jeffrey Sachs has said. Invest in know-how, invest in universities. And let's remember, 200 years ago, Europe was an agricultural continent, relatively low life expectancy rate. And two things happened. Many things happened, but two things were outstanding. Watson invented the steam engine, which had a revolutionary effect because all of a sudden you had more energy available per capita than ever, and surplus energy was used for economic development. And the second one was that through scientific breakthroughs, a little bit like later on in the century, you basically doubled the life expectancy of adults because viral diseases, typhoid, tuberculosis, and other things, the detection of bacteria, and Louis Pasteur's invention then of antibiotics, things that have become daily consumption patterns, have revolutionized the setting up in Europe, together with the formation of collective capitalism by the share corporation. Those three ingredients, you look at China, that's what they've been doing. And there was competition between the regions in Europe for centuries, and they applied the same three pillars. So coming back to your question, I don't have the one-size-fits-all recipe for my 16, 20, 25 German regions, but what I have to ascertain as a federal government is to have a strong and competitive university network, and to have infrastructure, cabling, mobile connections, the digital infrastructure that a modern country needs. And the rest, I think, which is 95% of the picture we would like to see painted, is being done by private individuals. And that's the thing, the right mixture between public capital expenditure in common good type infrastructure, which the market cannot provide, and a minimum economically free set of individuals that are the day-to-day innovators that we need. It cannot be made, the dynamism in our way of living cannot be coming from a federal government top-down, but we can set the right framework conditions by going into these long-term public infrastructure investments.
And Vassilian, if I could add to that, which I completely concur, if you look at the map that you showed, or the box that you showed just now of the different regions, and you take each one of them which was in the lower west quadrant, meaning low entrepreneurship, low innovation, you had Carlo Vivari. And I would remind that Carlo Vivari was first one of Europe's most popular touristic destinations is Carlsbad. It's also a very innovative place. It's got a number of universities and technical institutes. There was actually a lot of very innovative industry in Karlovy Vary before the Second World War, in porcelain and in other areas. There's no reason why such a beautiful place, massive touristic capacity. Actually, it's a great place to visit because it's a beautiful, beautiful place also. Could not become a hub, a regional hub of innovation again. And it's not so far from Prague or other centers in the Czech Republic, to make it so out of the way. And so I think if we took each of those places in the lower left and thought about the history, the local assets, the potential, there'd be a pretty good story to tell. Because there's no reason why any part of Europe in this vast, rich history is really out of the way or, inevitably left behind. But that one caught my eye because that was such a center of culture, tourism, innovation industry, and it could be again.
Thank you very much for these very accurate reflections. I will fully subscribe to your assessment. What happens, however, and I had a discussion recently with the stakeholder from the Czech Republic, is a process which, in a way, depletes also the innovation potential, because the innovation potential is not staying with physically with a certain location. It leaves with the people. It's the depopulation. It's the brain drain. And this is something that is concerning not only the Czech Republic, the respective Czech regions, which you've seen in this two-dimensional graph, but also Romania and Poland. So the question here, and this is a question to both to Dr. Kerber and to you, Professor Sachs, what can we do? And this is a question from Poland. What can we do to keep the young people in these regions, to retain this human capital, to retain this innovation that is basically they are the carriers of the innovation potential? Given the fact that the well-paid jobs which are associated with the incumbent coal industries are going to disappear soon, or expected to disappear soon.
I think we're all looking for dynamism and the sense of promise and change, and I don't see any. I don't see any reason for pessimism myself. Again, the future is not in coal. This is clear, but the future is in Europe building a clean, green, innovative, digital, sustainable, inclusive society. Lots of adjectives there. But when I look around the world, which I do every year for the projects that I lead for the UN, the European countries are at the top of the list in quality of life. They're at the top of the list in sustainable development. They're at the top of the list in life expectancy. They are in the top of the list in democratic institutions. They're in the top of the list, by the way, in happiness or subjective well-being, which we study also. So I'm a little jealous. You know, I'm in the United States. We're down around 40th on the list right now in just about everything. But I don't see the reason for pessimism at all, frankly. But what I do believe is that this era, these next 10 years should be an era of investment in the new economy, in sustainable development. I think Europe is off to the right direction completely, because to my mind, as I said at the beginning, the European Green Deal is the most coherent program in the world on sustainable development. It combines decarbonization, it combines circular economy, reducing pollution and waste, it combines the farm to fork initiatives, it combines digital Europe. And taking those together is really an exciting prospect. But I think people need to know more about it, and these projects need to, be undertaken. One of the problems, by the way, is, and it's a little surprising, but still in places like the Czech Republic, which I know, and in Poland, there is not enough understanding of the transition. There's even still, like there is in the US, climate skepticism. Why are we doing this? Climate change isn't real, and so on, which is a little bit out of date and a little bit lazy at this point. But it does mean that there needs to be more public understanding of what is the direction of the future. Where are the investments going? How does our part of Europe fit into the whole picture? How does Europe fit into the global picture? I think that's important for hope, to give people a better understanding of what the direction of change is and why, that it's not arbitrary, it's not punitive, it's not punishing a particular place, and it's not leaving any place behind. That it's done for real reasons, for better life. And the more this is understood, the more energized and successful the transformation will be, the less anxiety, the less populism, which we really don't want right now because it doesn't lead to constructive change. And the less people will feel that they have to move somewhere, although there's no good answer for that anyway.
Dr. Kerber, before you reflect on that, may I invite you to consider one more question, because we are coming to an end of this debate, and now shifting from the economic dimension to a more philosophical one. We realize that when we talk about just transition, we need to be aware of the just epithet, how this epithet is actually being interpreted from different regions. We know that the coal regions are believing that there is an unequal distribution of costs, whereas there is a distribution of social benefits, whereas other regions which have already long been embracing sustainable commitments may or are concerned about the upward sloping marginal damage inflicted from the coal-related industries, and may perceive any lack of action in terms of fixing, remedying a market failure as a reward. So how do we reconcile this just epithet? And I'd like to touch upon something that Professor Sachs said about it is actually a global exercise. We need the collective wisdom of the entire society. We need also a Eurasian Green Deal, an American Green Deal. We are all on the same planet, but this requires a reconciliation of the just epithet. Dr. Kerber, would you like to reflect on that? How can we achieve that?
I mean, the answer is at least 6.5 hours of philosophical answering. But the economist, the social scientist, the historian in me revolts because justice is such a tall concept, and market results, in fact, the result of human interaction and action in a free and dynamic society, very rarely transforms itself into a commonly shared dimension of feeling being treated just by life. So that it connects to the question you alluded to a little while ago. When borders come down, when barriers are being removed, people love to move around. And we cannot complain that people move around inside Europe. That was the whole purpose why we built that. And of course, people from the countryside moved to the city, but then 20 years later, maybe they moved back to the countryside. Maybe they moved back from Germany to Romania. Now they're moving from Romania to Germany. This is what freedom is all about. But as I have to go in literally 1 minute to see my minister, I would like to try and give one hopeful answer, and that is, whenever we have in a free democratic society unjust or unjust results, there is the political dialogue. There is the democratic dialogue to then implant redistributory measures, not just material ones, but also political ones, to give people who feel treated or who feel being treated unjust back a kind of compensation, both material and immaterial. And I think that is the huge formula that we have to apply in the pathway for the decarbonization until 2038 in Germany, to have established the material pot, which is the 40 billion for all those regions, but also the participatory processes at the local level, at the regional level, and at the federal level, to make everyone heard and make them feel part of a process that they can self-determine. And it's, I think, this self-determination element that gives people a feeling of that they can have a part in correcting injustices. I don't know a single market process that has an effect or automatic just result, because it's in a way absurd to ask for a just market result, because it's always based on the actions of individuals. And name me one facet of social life where 2, 3, or 4, 5 members of any given single family think it's just what happened when it comes to selecting a holiday target. I have it at my dinner table. Whenever I go for a certain holiday vacation, at least 2 of my 4 kids think it's a totally unjust result. So I have to redistribute them materially and immaterially.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. This is an extremely interesting exchange, insightful, and I'd like to thank both of you for accepting invitation to this meeting. Professor Sachs, because I think this is the unique opportunity of having you, if possible, we would like to have you for further debates as we are going to explore the issue of structural recovery, economic transition, going back from the coal to some other, say, media of energy. So by your permission, I would like to offer us as the ESPON program to be of link to your work, also to your further activities. And well, by going global, ESPON should also do some work on going digital. We have had some technical difficulties, but this is something that we still need to master in terms of new technologies. So once again, please accept our cordial thanks, and we hope to embark on a journey with you together with our partners, the European Investment Bank, the member states, EFTA countries, and no other, say, allies to ESPON territorial evidence. Thanks again for being with us. Best greetings to America, to the US after the elections. And well, we hope that we stay in touch for future exchanges. Thanks a lot also to the entire audience that was streaming this live debate. And please stay in touch with you also for tomorrow's debate with the Commissioner and members of the European Parliament. Professor Sachs, thanks a lot.
Thanks to you, to ESPON, to Secretary Kerber. A great pleasure to be together with all of you. Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.